This is the first app I've ever felt compelled to leave a review on. Rooted includes the most effective grounding exercise I've ever attempted. I installed it in the midst of a severe panic attack, and I experienced instant relief. Rooted just did, in my first use, more for my ability to handle anxiety than the combined effort of anything else I've ever tried. Thank you, Rooted team, from the bottom of my heart. Hi, everyone. My name is Ania, and I'm here today to tell you the story of how Rooted was bootstrapped to 1.4 million users and the 6 key things I focused on to get there. To start, does anybody here experience anxiety and/or panic attacks or know someone who does? By show of hands, if you're comfortable. Yeah, seeing quite a few hands in the room, and that makes a ton of sense. Anxiety is one of the most prevalent mental health issues in the world. And even though it can be so debilitating, over 66% of people don't actually find the resources they need to get treatment, whether that's due to stigma or financial constraints or inaccessibility of resources. And that's where I found myself. In my fourth year of university, I had my first panic attack, and I didn't have access to traditional resources, so I took to my phone to see if there's something that could help. And the only apps that existed at the time were apps that were more hypnosis apps or apps that were very medical in nature. Nothing that spoke to me or my demographic. So that's where the seed for Rooted was planted. I started drawing the wireframes of what Rooted would become in my notebooks. And fast forward a few years, today Rooted is anxiety and panic attack relief in your pocket. It has a number of different therapist-approved tools, including things like that instant actual panic attack button, deep breathing exercises, lessons on what anxiety is, journal tools, visualization exercises, sleep stories, and it's all gamified, so you collect points as you go. Rooted operates on a freemium B2C model with revenue-generating partnerships as well as B2B company plans. So that's what Rooted is, but what happened to get in the hands of 1.4 million users? When I was thinking about what to cover in this presentation, so many things came to mind, a lot of things that worked and a ton of things that didn't, but that would be longer than 15 minutes. So I managed to narrow it down to these 6 key things. And those are focusing on a niche, user engagement, story submissions, press releases, translation, and onboarding experimentation. And what's cool about these 6 things is that you can do them all organically without the help of a venture capitalist and without paying a ton for external support. So now I'll dive into each of these with some stories and takeaways. Starting with focusing on a niche. So finding a simple solution to a complex problem is the best thing any bootstrap startup can do. In Rooted's case, this was represented by that red panic button that was referenced in the testimonial I shared with you at the beginning of the presentation. The value proposition was very clear. It was a very clear focus on panic attacks. And users saw that, it resonated with them. They started leaving 5-star reviews. And so rather than go after that larger market segment of anxiety, I focused a lot on the lower volume, lower difficulty keyword of panic attacks. And it wasn't until over time, as that started ranking highly, I started adding in more tools for anxiety and focusing more on the keyword anxiety. And as you can see, over time, that just really worked out for Rooted. Proud to say that today we are number 1 for panic attacks and number 3 for anxiety in the US, which was a huge goal from the beginning. So the takeaway here was really to stay hyper-focused and then expand from there in both product and ASO. Second thing is user engagement. So this can mean a lot of different things to different people, but for me, what I mean is basically just making sure that you're responding to every user, whether it's a positive user review or a negative, and whether it's through email or social media. On the one hand, the benefit is that you get a lot of feedback from users that you would otherwise miss. One example for Rooted was one time a couple wrote to me sharing that they were using Rooted's visualization tools to get to sleep at night. And that's not a use case I had thought of. And they were requesting that the app stay open after their phone closes, or that the screen still works. And I ended up creating a sleep tool for this use case, and now a ton of people are using the sleep tool in the app, and our in-app engagement, the actual time, has increased significantly because of that. So that was a gem. And I'm sure many of you know not all user feedback is super helpful though. So in those cases, you still respond and kind of just let them know, why we're not going to be implementing their feedback. And people really enjoy that. There are a ton of people who choose to share about Rooted on their profiles, and this is huge for a Bootstrap company. So these are all examples of non-paid partnerships, just people wanting to share about Rooted, ranging from people with 2,000 followers to 100,000 followers. And yeah, this often happens after we just engage with people, whether or not they're free or paying users. So this, I guess my takeaway here is that it doesn't take a ton of capital to start building user trust. Story submissions. I used to submit story submissions all the time without hearing anything back, and it really compelled me to need some sort of system so that I don't stop doing it. So what I did was basically for every calendar month of the year, I would basically select a theme for that month and then submit an app story related to that. So for example, February is Stress Awareness Month. In February, even if I didn't know what my update would be yet, I would make sure that it tied back to that story. And I did this really consistently until finally I got that email from the App Store saying, hey, Ania, one of our App Store editors saw your story submission. Since then, Rooted has been App of the Day in Canada, in the US, Developer Spotlight in the US, and featured in hundreds of different collections around the world. So I think here that if I didn't keep going, I don't know that I would have gotten that call back. Press releases. A lot of people think that press releases should be reserved for larger companies, but in the case of Rooted, I actually started when Rooted had 0 users. The first press release I ever did for Rooted was when we were launching. And I'd recommend, if you can connect it to a real world story, you can do this even when you don't have users. So I did this very similar to the app story submission where I would follow a calendar. So for example, October 10th is World Mental Health Day. Early on in the pandemic, when NBA players opened up about their struggles with mental health with quarantine, I did a press release about that. And the way I do this on a Bootstrap budget is I worked with a friend's contact through Fiverr for distribution, and then I also chose to write my own press releases, which saves you a few extra $100 every time. And I personally just enjoy doing that. And yeah, I realized over time too that people really enjoy seeing the face behind the product. At first, when these publications would ask for my headshot, I would send them photos of the app mascot, Ron, you've seen in this presentation, and they would be like, what are you doing? Send us your headshot. And it took a while for me to overcome that feeling of vulnerability with that, but I ended up doing that, and as you can see on the right-hand side, it just opened up that many more venues for getting featured in those publications. And that top right segment is actually from the day of the President Biden versus Trump election in the US. So that was a great day to end up getting some TV time, and this was all through press releases. So the takeaway here is that if you could connect a real-world event to your app in a unique way, press releases can be valuable at any stage of your business, even Bootstrap. Translations. So this is probably the least businessy business decision I'd made for Rooted. Basically, a user from Brazil wrote to me. They sent me a World Health Organization article sharing how many users in Brazil, or how many people in Brazil struggle with panic attacks and anxiety. And the story really resonated with me personally. So without any monetization plan or marketing plan, I decided to invest in translating Rooted into Portuguese. And what resulted were just people from Brazil and Portugal, tens of thousands of people using the app and sharing how grateful they were to have access to it. And this all happened before Google Play separated rankings by geography, so it gave us a really great organic boost as well. Rooted is now available in 8 different languages, and in some of the cultures where these languages are spoken, mental health still isn't openly talked about. So we really offer that discrete source of support on users' phones, and that's what they share with us. So it just is another reason that really ties back to our values of why we started Rooted. And I won't sugarcoat it, though. It's very difficult. Sometimes it's overwhelming when you're working on a new feature and you need to translate into 8 languages. So on a Bootstrap budget, my tip there is just to work with good translators on Fiverr, and also shout out to Google Translate for helping with customer service. So you can reach a lot more people with and user reviews with translations. Finally, onboarding experimentation. I've done a number of different experiments with the onboarding process of Rooted, ranging from trying to get users from install to sign up, trying to increase that conversion rate, or to get users to the aha moment in Rooted quicker. But one of the most successful experiments I've ever done is introducing a free trial paywall near the beginning of the onboarding process. At first, I was quite hesitant. I was worried that users wouldn't respond well to a paywall in an app of the nature of Rooted. However, it actually was pretty unfounded. People know how to bypass those payment screens already if they want to, and the revenue of Rooted increased by over 6 times in just a month. So the ability to reach way more people with those resources was just great. So obviously, keep experimenting, and sometimes you'll be really surprised by the results. So as a recap of what worked well, that's focusing on a niche, user engagement, story submissions, press releases, translations, and onboarding experimentation. And what's cool about these 6 things is that you can go a lot deeper with them. So now that Rooted's at 1.4 million users, I'm not going to stop using them. I'm going to keep using them and hopefully keep getting better at them. The story of Rooted is definitely no rocket ship. It took hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments to get to where it is today. But where it is at 1.4 million users, 85% organic, featured over 100 times on the app stores. We've achieved scientific validation, a keyword ranking of #1 for panic attacks and #3 for anxiety in the US, a 4.8 global rating with over 16,000 ratings, and with everything I'm learning every month, week, and day, I can see that we're just scratching the surface and just getting started. So, thank you for listening.